My name is Andrew Nagy. I'm a Director of Software Innovation at EBSCO. And I'm joined here with Michelle Colquitt currently from Gwinnett Technical College in Georgia. So today's session we're going to talk about authentication and the idea of SAML technology and the transition for that. And Michelle's going to talk a little bit about how her college went through a transition with authentication technology. So we're aiming to reserve about 10 minutes at the end of the session for questions. I want to start out by talking about how EBSCO is involved with this. And we've partnered with a service provider, OpenAthens, as a solution to help support our customers with authentication needs. OpenAthens is something that's very unique, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different nature of how OpenAthens works, and I want to talk about the concepts to kind of help be more educational about that. But I always like to start by saying that this is a partnership that we've formed with EBSCO and OpenAthens to better help support our customers, to better help support you all in improving the seamless access to content for your users. It starts, though, with the end user's journey. And the reason I like to say that it starts there is because authentication is a part of the end user's experience with the library's collection, with the library's resources. But it starts with, does the library patron are they even able to find the library's website, right? So we're talking about access to electronic content. And so the most important part of starting that process is by working with and navigating the library's collection. And a lot of that starts with the library's website. We know that a lot of patrons are accessing content and starting with Google Scholar and other broader discovery services, but we really want to make sure that the patrons are starting with the library's website and using the library's resources. And that flows into the discovery services that you might provide, things like a discovery search tool or maybe research guides, ways to explore and work with the library's collection. And then that leads into your link resolver, or what I like to call full text fulfillment, helping to deliver the user to that actual resource so they can access that content. And it could be, in many cases, a number of different platforms that you have access to that content. But that last step in that process, in my mind, and the way I view the full text the full end user experience, is authentication. Network topographies are under a tremendous amount of change at universities. With the soon deployment of 5G cellular technology, it really changes the way we use internet and networking technologies, the way users might access the internet. And so in today's age, we commonly use IP authentication as a way to control access to these commercial resources. And IP authentication assumes that the patron is on a controlled network at the university or at the college. But in so many cases, that's not the scenario. So many institutions are expanding their campuses, they're building remote campuses, campuses in the Middle East, semester at sea. Users are working with mobile devices more so than ever, and it continues to increase all the time with access to resources from those devices. So they could be using Verizon's network to access materials. They could be on campus but using other networks. And managing IP addresses is so difficult for libraries with the publishers. So we've been thinking about how can this possibly change? How can we make sure that no matter what device, no matter what network, no matter where in the world, that user has seamless access to content, whether they're on campus or not, and also creating a very consistent user experience. And so authentication is a big part of that. We still deal with today these problematic aspects of accessing content. We still deal with authentication challenges on a daily basis. How many of you manage a proxy server or have a proxy server at your library where a publisher changed the address from HTTP to HTTPS? One letter, and how much of a problem was that, right? Yeah, let's get rid of that process. So this is kind of how EBSCO help work with our customers in fulfilling all of these steps in the process. We want to make sure that we can help you address all of these aspects. And so OpenAthens is a great fit for how we can help our customers. So how is it different? First and foremost, it's a fully cloud-based service. So one of the great ways that our customers really want to help to transition their infrastructure, their technology, their services to make this more accessible is to leverage cloud hosting services, right? So that's important. The most important aspect, I think, in this is to talk about the transition away from IP authentication to using SAML technology. And you don't need to know what SAML stands for. If you want to know, I'll tell you after. But I'm going to try to help explain what SAML is and why it's so different and how publishers and libraries are using it. We're also moving away from this world of anonymous IP-based authentication to an identity-based authentication. What this means is you can control access leveraging SAML technology down to the user. Maybe you license a resource that has access to your alumni, or your alumni can gain access to that resource, and you want to be able to allow alumni to access that. Or maybe you want to say for a certain resource, alumni cannot access that. So think about control and management of resources. Just because I walk onto your campus and plug my computer into an internet jack doesn't mean that I should have access to your library's resources, right? I should be authenticated based on who I am as a user versus just being an anonymous individual. You can also do things like categorization of users, and also, as I just mentioned, controlling access, because we're now talking about identity-based authentication. But because we're also dealing with individual users and we're capturing information about who those users are, wouldn't it be great if we could also get some real reporting data on how our resources are being used? But I think what's also very important too is by bringing those services into a cloud environment, we no longer have to worry about logging into a server and editing text files. We should be able to do that through a web-based administration interface. We want to be able to have more important configuration work, but when we think about SAML technology, we're no longer using proxy rewriting, right? We're no longer getting routed through a central system that can potentially cause problems, things that have to be configured, connectors that have to be created. We need to be able to use a more modern technology, the same technology that Google and Microsoft and Facebook and every other major technology provider leverages, right? And SAML has really become the de facto technology. So let's talk about what SAML is, but I want to do a quick little commercial. For those of you who, hopefully, if you've been to Charleston before, you've heard a bit about this effort. So up until this past summer, the RA21 was an initiative made up of librarians and publishers. Is anybody in the room involved with RA21? Okay, awesome, good. We got a few in the back. So ask them questions later. So RA21 was a kind of this movement, a committee, a working committee of publishers and librarians who said, listen, technology is changing and we can't rely on IP authentication anymore for controlling access to resources. Some publishers have even gone as far as shutting IP authentication off because they're seeing their content being spewed all over the internet illegally. And so we need to have a better way of controlling access down to the user level, and that's where SAML technology comes into play. And so the RA21 was an initiative that really tried to help champion this change, this model. And recently, the NISO organization has taken it up as a best practice, as a recommended practice, and we'll be working towards standardizing this model. What they're saying is we're no longer going to use IP authentication. Publishers and libraries are going to work together to no longer use IP authentication, and we're going to standardize on the use of SAML technology. And so major publishers have already implemented this, and more publishers are coming on board. One of the other big benefits of what the RA21 group has come to say is, and you've probably seen this already, you go to a major publisher site and you see something on the upper right-hand corner that says something like institutional login, right? Or Athens login or something like that, network-based a login approach. But every publisher has implemented it in a different way. It looks different. The login is in a different location. It's a different color. The fonts are different. Everything's different about it. And so the RA21 group has also said, let's standardize the user experience on how end users log in so that they can consistently log in from anywhere. If they want to log in at the library's website, or if they want to log in at the publisher's site, they should be able to do that in a very seamless fashion. And so the RA21 group has also pushed forward this recommendation as well for a consistent user experience. So for the publishers in the room, I want you to think about how do you improve the end user experience for the patrons who are accessing the content, and be able to make sure that they can access the content if they're coming in from Google Scholar or other resources, where they haven't first logged in through the library, but now they go to the publisher's website and be able to log in. And so this is another recommendation from the RA21 group that leverages what I like to call the big blue button. And by putting this big blue button in a consistent way across all these different publishers, users can authenticate into the publisher platform no matter where they're coming from. So if they go directly to the publisher, if they start with Google Scholar, they can log in using this button, which utilizes your login system, your single sign-on directory system at the university. Allows them to log in and then get access to those resources via this new technology, via SAML technology. Once you're logged in, then it tells you, hey, you're already logged in and you're getting access to this content because your library paid for it, right? So the researcher is getting that understanding that, oh, hey, look, I'm getting access to this already from my university. So there's tying that back in, which I think is also really important. So a few key terms too, because we're also talking about a lexicographical change. I like to use good librarian terms. So in today's modern way, or the way that we've been doing it in the past, is by using IP authentication, leveraging a proxy service. So you're probably all familiar with that. I don't need to educate you on that. But what's important is when we move to SAML, we talk about the idea of an identity provider and a service provider. Your service provider is the publisher, the place that your users are trying to get access to materials, what they're trying to authenticate. Your identity provider is you, the university. You have a directory system of user accounts. You own the user account information, the usernames and passwords that they use to access all of the resources at your institution. The identity provider is that service. So you continue to remain the single sign-on point where your user account information sits. OpenAthens or your other SAML-based services don't have access to that information. You continue to own and maintain that information. Once that authentication part is created, now you have access to the service provider because we all participate in a federation. So we also might hear the terms federated access, right? So a federation is, think of it as a network of trust. If you participate in this federation, I'm trusting everybody else who participates in this federation. So we don't have to pass around user data, and we don't have to pass around usernames and passwords. We're just passing around a token that identifies a user and saying, hey, this user authenticated to your university, so the publisher is going to trust that user and let them in and give them access. Assuming you have an active subscription, right? They're not just going to give access to all libraries. So just a quick intro to how this all works. So this is a SAML technology diagram, right? We are moving away from IP authentication and we're moving into this world of SAML technology. So what that means is, step one is I log into my university system. The university system is integrated in with a system like OpenAthens. And that system provides information about that user to OpenAthens. OpenAthens then says, okay, now I have a valid user, and now I'm going to share some information about that user with the publisher and let them in. But we also want to think about privacy. We don't want to share a whole lot of information necessarily with the publishers, or maybe we do, but we want to have control over what information is shared. And so OpenAthens can help facilitate you determining what level of information you're willing to share. And so you can, per publisher, say, I only want to share the identifier, a very, very core basic amount of information. But maybe you do also want to share something like year of graduation, or maybe you want to share college affiliation or department affiliation that helps to identify a little bit more about this user. Not personally identifiable information, but a little bit more of information that allows a service or a publisher to kind of categorize that user and personalize their experience. So there's some benefits to the end user, but you have full control over what information is shared with the publisher. And that is all built into the core standard aspect of SAML. And SAML is a standard authentication technology that has been adopted by all the major technology companies. So I want to walk you through a very quick example of this. And I totally lied. It is not live. I didn't want to go live on the presentation computer here, so I just screenshotted this. So we'll pretend it's live. It kind of looks live. So it's a kind of live demo. So this is a great library, a medical library in Australia. Anybody from Australia here? No, that's too far away. That's a really long flight. Okay, so this is a medical library in Australia, and the whole reason I'm going to show you this is because they were really nice and they gave me a username and password to do a demonstration with. So it's kind of hard to demonstrate authentication if you don't have a valid username and password. So they gave me one just for demonstration purposes. And so when I log in to this site, now I'm in their library's website. And for some reason, don't ask me why, they put an authentication page in front of the library's website. You can't even get to the library's website without logging in. There are any medical libraries here? Okay, so you guys might know better than I do. I have no idea why they require that. They probably have some privacy issues or whatever that they have to deal with. So now that I'm on the library's website, now I can get into any resource that my library subscribes to because I have that SAML token on my computer. I don't have to click any of these links. I can go right to the publisher, and the publisher can now know that I'm a valid user and let me in. Or I could click on some of these links. I'm going to click on that bright orange box in the middle of the screen that says clinical key, which happens to be an Elsevier database. You can see down here that I have clicked on that URL down there at the bottom. So for those of you who are using something like EasyProxy or some sort of proxy, you're familiar with this idea of a proxy prefix on the beginning of the URL, right? So OpenAthens has something very similar. We call it the Redirector. The Redirector does a very simple job, actually a little bit more complex, but I like to think of it as a simple job. What it does is it simply checks to see if the user has already logged in or not. So it's a good practice to put that prefix on your URLs because it makes that user experience better. They don't then have to go to the publisher and find that login screen. Hopefully once the big blue box is prevalent everywhere, it'll be easy, but until that becomes prevalent everywhere, it's kind of difficult to find that login button on your publisher's website. So let's log them in first before they go to try and access content. So we put that redirector link there. And what that does is it first checks to see if you logged in or not. It also does some other fancy things, negotiations with the publisher behind the scenes. But you don't need to worry about that. That's something that OpenAthens technology takes care of. So, but you just saw I already logged in. So when I click that redirector link, now I'm on the publisher's website. And if you look at the top, I've got my glasses on, so some of you might need to put yours on. But if you look at the very top, because it's hard to see, there's no redirector, there's no prefix. I'm just on the website. But if you also look on the right-hand corner there, that's got my buddy's name, Jeff. So we share the same account, and he put his name on it. He beat me to the punch. So he put his name in the account. He opted in. So he went to the Elsevier site, he went to Clinical Key and typed in on the My Accounts page, he typed in his first name and last name. He opted in to sharing his information with the publisher, which is totally fine. So he went to this page, he put his information in there. Elsevier already knew who I was and automatically logged me into my personal account because I was able to share that token that came from the authentication step with Elsevier. And Elsevier said, oh, hey, I don't know your first name and your last name, but I know that you are identified by the characters of ABC123. You are user ABC123. You've been to my site before. I'm going to automatically log you in. So now I can do that with all of my other major publishers as well. ProQuest and EBSCO and Gale and JSTOR all support these types of technologies. And so the idea being is that I only log in once, and now I'm logged into all of my library's resources, and in that case, the library's website, and all of those resources know a little bit about me, right? You get to determine what level of information to share. In this case, we didn't share anything, but Jeff went in and typed his first name and last name into the system. So we are allowing the user to opt in, but we are sharing, but we are also very creating a very consistent and seamless user experience, no matter where they're coming from. If they're coming from the library's website, if they're coming from the discovery tool, if they're coming from Google Scholar, or they're just manually typing in the URL to the publisher website, or their colleague at another institution sent them a link. They can click on it and access that content. Also, those links up there are now more persistent because they don't have any sort of proxy prefixes or any identifiers in there, anything to muck it up. So we've got a very good clean URL as well that we can use to share. So that is my very brief and high-level introduction to OpenAthens and to SAML technology. Hopefully I was helpful in explaining a little bit about what SAML technology is all about and how this can be a real big use and better improvement in your user experience. But I want to hand it over to my colleague Michelle, who has recently implemented OpenAthens at her institution, to talk about what the implementation was like and how OpenAthens has helped her users. There you go. And thank you.
So I'm Michelle Colquitt, and I'm currently a library associate at Gwinnett Technical College. The too long, don't pay attention version of this is we love OpenAthens. Everything about this process was fun, easy to deal with. There was no problem whatsoever. So here we see a screen where there is a group in Athens on Facebook, the Athens Group of Mediocre Ladies. Someone is asking for the Galileo password. And Galileo is our statewide consortium with all of our electronic resources. I'm just blatantly asking for the password. Somebody's saying, you know, here's the one for Georgia College and State University. It's Ruby.
Very secure password.
Right. And so here's the one that's STEP. This is also a media center for a high school out in the very boondocks of Georgia. Here's our Galileo password. So obviously we need to have a little bit more secure access to our resources. So Galileo stands for Georgia Library Learning Online. It is the statewide consortium for our electronic resources in Georgia. Galileo has a reach of over 9 million potential users. These users are in our state university system, where there are 26 university system institutions, 22 technical colleges with varying levels of vocational education, certificates, associate's degrees, 38 private colleges and universities, 62 library systems that are both Pines libraries, that's our public library system, and then there's also independent libraries that have a reach of 4.2 million users. 181 public school systems with 2,000 plus students and faculty staff, 22 private K-12 schools. So we just have a wide variety of users in Georgia. And you know, we had things like, here's the Galileo password, here it is for the media center, here it is for the, you know, whatever college. So Galileo decided on some strategic planning with new goals for 2020 to include a new focus on user-centered design, and they're redesigning the portal, how you access Galileo, and also focusing on mobile-first design. I know a little bit about that because I'm also on that committee. That's the Galileo Developers Committee. And then also the ease of authentication. We're focusing on changing over to OpenAthens. Our site, Gwinnett Technical College, was the 5th site in the state of Georgia to go live. And so now we have a story time from me. So the Gwinnett Technical College Library, we had been in a state kind of great upheaval. The county public library controlled the contract. The president of the college wanted the library to be controlled by the state. And so everybody was newly hired in October and November of 2017. Right around that time, we were hired. Hey, we're going to go live with Alma and Primo in 2018 in June. So here you go. You got to learn every little bit about Alma Primo. You've got to have all these different files from your former ILS. You've got to do everything. So that was like a great bonding experience. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it was a great bonding experience. So we got to go live in June of 2018, and I'm the kind of person that I'm like, now what? What's our new project? Can we volunteer for something? Is there something that's going on? So we always go to the Galileo conference. They have a one-day conference every July just to kind of say, here's what's going on with Galileo. And so we went in June of 2018, and there was a presentation about OpenAthens, and I was fired up. I was like, let's go ahead and volunteer. There was a call for volunteers, and I told my supervisor about it, and she's like, oh, that's awesome. It's your project. So, okay. So I went ahead and volunteered, and so here's my inspiration break. This is kind of one of my personal philosophies. I don't fool around with a lot of things that I can't have fun with. There's just not a whole lot of reward in that, the late, great Lee Von Helm. This process was a lot of fun, and I just kind of saw that it would be a good, fun process. So now we were a pilot site. We were one of the 3 technical colleges chosen in the state of Georgia. The other 2 were Chattahoochee Technical College, which is actually our largest technical college in the state of Georgia. It has 9 different campuses in Marietta and the surrounding area. And then also Georgia Northwestern College was the 3rd pilot site too. So how were we chosen? I had that, please pick me. And then I did have the autonomy to say, yeah, it's your project, go ahead, keep me kind of informed, but you don't have to really keep me informed of everything. So our Gwinnett Tech facts, us by the numbers, we are a member of the Technical College System of Georgia. There are the 22 technical colleges statewide. We have 2 Metro Atlanta campuses, one in Lawrenceville, Georgia, which is approximately 25 miles from downtown Atlanta, and then our other campus is the Palace in Alpharetta, Georgia. It's a suburb of Atlanta. If it tells you anything, there was a Tesla dealership there. There's a Whole Foods right across from the campus. It's a little bit of a ritzier area. So our population is approximately 9,000 to 9,200 plus students each semester. Many of our students are dually enrolled, coming to get their core classes out of the way before they move on. These students are coming from Gwinnett County Public Schools, Fulton County, and Atlanta Public Schools. We also have the traditional college student who has just graduated from college or who has just obtained their GED and are moving on to pursue their career education. But then we also have our non-traditional students who are older, coming back from raising their children or from another career path or whatever. We have a lot of diversity on our campus as well. So our onboarding process, this began roughly August of 2018 to kind of early December of 2018. So this was me volunteering, hey, let us be a pilot site. So we had to get our GLRI in order. That's our Galileo Local Resource Integration. And Galileo provides us with a suite of databases, and then they have the option, they allow us to integrate our locally purchased resources in there. Some of the locally purchased things we have were Statista, Films on Demand, GVRL, some of those other things. So we had meetings. There was an initial kickoff meeting with some of the OpenAthens staff from the UK. So it was the end of their day and then the beginning of our day. We had our local IT there, TCSGIT, just to kind of come together and say, here's what SAML is, here's what we need from you. We need access to your identity provider, and in our case, that's our banner system. And then, here's what will be happening behind the scenes. We did have monthly meetings as part of the Galileo pilots, so that was kind of just to keep us informed of what was going on. And there was just open communication with everyone involved. What I particularly liked about OpenAthens is that they handled like all of the vendor stuff on their end, and there were just very few things that were like, hey, we need you to help us with this. Can you tell us your IP range, or can you tell us this, that, the other? So it was not a bad process at all. So prepping for Go Live, this is December 2018. So we had quite a lot of Ex Libris Alma work to do. We had to create an integration profile for OpenAthens. This was just to enable the Redirector. It's a nice little feature that you can create a link just automatically. We had to edit several things at the collection level to kind of change the proxy settings. It was nothing too bad. I think this was probably like maybe the second most intensive part of actually going live. So we had our preparation for go live activities. We had publicity that we did. This is a blog post I wrote about Galileo. You see the picture of Galileo and then the logo of Galileo. We had our handouts. We created email blasts, basically just saying that, that, hey, we're changing over. If you want to save things in your folders, make sure that you go ahead and create another account so you can save it. There were faculty meeting presentations just to kind of keep everybody informed of, hey, this is coming, here's what to expect. And so 12, 17, 18, we went live. So now what? Thankfully, this was over a break between our semesters. And so we did have a few students come in. There were our student workers. They tested access to OpenAthens. We weren't able to access it. So basically what happened is that there was like one tiny thing on Gwinnett Tech's backside that needed to be fixed. They fixed it within 5 minutes. We were live. Everything was working. I was like, oh my gosh, steam coming out of my ears, like we can't access. No, we can. Don't freak out. So we had to make changes in our teaching practice. We teach a lot of English classes, so we have one-shots pretty much every day during the semesters. So what I did to change my teaching practice is to ensure that our students know how to log in first. So we log into Blackboard, log into Dashboard, then you can access Galileo. We do still have the password, and I've given it out maybe one time this semester, and that was just simply because a girl called up and was like, oh my gosh, I can't access Galileo, and freaking out, like, here's the password, it'll be okay. So we had to make some SpringShare changes too. So this was like actually the most time intensive was changing our links on our website. But thankfully you are able to download your links as a file, and then you can go through and pick out which links need to be changed, then use your redirector, and it's easy. I did create a canned message in LibAnswers to just say, hey, go ahead and log into Blackboard or Dashboard first. Because a lot of our questions that come through our chat was, oh my gosh, I can't access Galileo, how do I do it? I'm freaking out, I have this paper due, that whatever. So, almost a year out, what's our story? We love OpenAthens. Like, we've had just very few minor access issues that have been easily resolved, and their customer service is like the best customer service I've ever experienced in my life. Like, they hold your hand the entire way. One thing, we had an issue with ProQuest Lion. For whatever reason, it didn't want to act right. And so I've tried to manipulate it in our LibGuides and fix it and everything. They actually got in touch with SpringShare on my behalf, got it fixed. It was awesome. The end. Their proactive customer service, if they notice any anomaly that's going on, like, they will get in touch with you and just be like, hey, this is bad, what's going on with this? We love the reporting functionalities. What you can kind of barely see, this is an actual report for the monthly usage of statistics. This, I believe, was September of 2019. And so you can kind of see the top, it tells you like the top 5 resources that are used. The one in red that like spiked up way high is the Galileo portal. So obviously it's the one that's most frequently used because our students are taught to access resources immediately through Galileo. Some of the other things that are on there, like we teach Statista, and so Statista is on that list too. So we can tell which resources are being used and how our students are using them. So privacy and future concerns. And I'm going to, this is the caveat that I am not an attorney. I don't even play one on TV. I did play one in a former career, but, that's just here or there. I was a juvenile probation officer, so. OpenAthens complies with the high standards for privacy and security. They are a European company, so they do comply with GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations. And then our Galileo standards are that by default we'll only share the very minimum number of attributes. That's usually like the student identifier number. At our institution, it's the 900 number and the student email. It's encrypted. It's not just going to be out there open. We will share additional attributes only if it's used for customization. And our institution, we didn't really customize a whole lot of anything. Like all of our students should have access to all of our resources. Once live, libraries are in total control of the attributes passed along to the vendor via OpenAthens administration. So, for example, if I did want to go in there and restrict access of nursing databases, I could go in there and easily restrict the access to the nursing databases. So questions, please feel free to email me. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, and my love of all things OpenAthens has gotten me a new job. Yay! I start on Monday, November 11th as an electronic resource management librarian at Georgia Gwinnett College, just basically down the road from Gwinnett Tech. And they are going live with OpenAthens on December 1st. So lucky me, I get to do it twice. Woo-hoo! So I guess that's it. Y'all have any questions? Yes.
Just so everybody could hear, that's in reference to the successor of RA21. RA21 was a working group, is now being picked up by NISO and being pushed out as a recommended practice. And that initiative going forward is known as Seamless Access. You can learn more about that by going to seamlessaccess.org. And I believe the session is tomorrow at the Courtyard Marriott, is what you said? Courtyard Marriott, if you'd like to learn more about how libraries are starting to use this and how publishers are providing services through this new initiative. Yeah, so you can continue to make IP authentication available, which you would want to continue to do until all of your libraries can support SAML authentication. So I think that might be a part of it. But in some cases, some libraries who are implementing SAML technology still use it in somewhat of a hybrid approach. And so it could be potentially where you're not fully implementing SAML, you're only using it for remote access users. And so, for example, faculty might just want to be able to get seamless access by leveraging IP authentication because they're on campus. Most institutions, even institutions that are still using proxy servers today, are really embracing this idea of always authenticating users. Because we can play the role of an intermediary and ensure that access is seamless, even if it's going through a proxy, right? Proxy servers can log activity, and so proxy servers can start to get some understanding as to usage. So I see so many universities now moving more and more to an always authenticate solution, in which case IP really no longer matters. But it might be. I would encourage you to fully embrace SAML technology as a way to move forward. So, it's a conversation that we want to have. I asked the product management team at EBSCO host if we were ever going to get rid of IP authentication. And they said, yes, absolutely. I said, really? when is that going to happen? They said, I have no idea. Because all libraries, all of our customers need to be prepared to use SAML technology. So we want to help our customers move to SAML authentication and move beyond using IP authentication, but it's going to take time. You know, I've already heard of some, like I said, some publishers where they've just been dealing with a tremendous amount of piracy of their data, has just gotten so fed up that they've turned off IP authentication. And what that means is their libraries, their customers, have had to scramble and figure out how to implement SAML technology. So we really want to help our customers move to this new technology so that publishers we collectively together as an industry can move away from this old legacy technology. Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely a scenario that OpenAthens handles. You know, it's a way of how you might want to implement it at your institution as a implementation practice. But with OpenAthens technology, OpenAthens does have the ability for you to create temporary accounts for walk-in users so that they can get access to your electronic resources. You can even do things like IP restriction on those temporary accounts, which means that a temporary account can only be used while the user is on campus. So there are some things that OpenAthens supports around that. SAML authentication just thinks of users being in a directory system, right, as that IDP that I mentioned before, the Identity Provider Service. So SAML is just expecting the user account to live in a central directory system. Now, maybe your university wants to allow you to record and create new temporary accounts within that. Most places say no. So OpenAthens does have the ability for you to create temporary accounts. You guys do?
We do,
Yeah.
and it's very easy to do. Like, you just go into the administration side, and then you can really easily generate a username and password. We do that, I think, pretty much for our adult ed students, because that's something that we're still kind of trying to figure out, because we have a high population of GED students that want to come in and say, hey, I need to study for my GED test, or hey, I need to do this, that, the other. Can you help me? So yeah, we absolutely can help you. Let me get the credentials set up, and then let me show you how to use it. So.
Where's the security if students can share the username and password?
That's not has to do necessarily with this, right? That's a problem anywhere, right? Whether you're using a proxy server anywhere, right? And that's something that OpenAthens is always looking at, is trying to see if there are multiple logins from different locations at the same time. It'll set a flag and block that user account and alert the library that something's going on with this account. But that's going to happen whether you're using proxy servers, whether you're using SAML technology, whether you're using anything, right? So I had sat in on a session at ERNL last year talking about information security. And the gentleman on stage from a security consulting company said that places like Sci-Hub, which, as I'm sure you're familiar with, pay undergraduate students $75 for a username and password. To an undergraduate student, hey, that's a free pizza and some beer. I mean, heck yeah, I'll do that. But what they don't realize is they're giving away their username and password not just for the library resources, but to their student registration system, to everything else, because so many institutions use a single sign-on system. So that's a much bigger conversation that needs to be had, and information security and privacy is something that we need to be teaching students so that they're familiar with the idea of don't share your username and password. It's not worth $75.
You are. Yeah, you absolutely are. So like if you had an alumni who wanted to come back and say, oh, I need access to whatever resource, you could create that username, password again, you know, providing that your license would allow alumni access.
Yep, so the benefit there is that your directory system has some information about the user, right? Which which department or part of affiliation are they with the institution? Are they faculty? Are they staff? Are they a librarian? Are they a student? Are they a graduate student? Are they alumni? And so Open Athens can leverage those metadata elements to control access as well. So you can put resources into Open Athens that are only available for certain groups of users. And so Open Athens can control access that way, which is really helpful.
So it sounds like it's helpful for this new trend of alumni access, but not so helpful with the whole walking user end. Which is, I'm from a public state university and that's mandated. So I'm seeing that having to create a new user account for everybody that walks in is very problematic.
Well, still with us, we do still have access, of course, to IP authentication. Galileo is not going to be completely transferred over to Open Athens probably until like 2020 or 2021. So for in the meantime, we do still have that access. That is still, a concern that we're thinking about. That is still something that, kind of is out there hanging.
Yeah, IP authentication is going to be around for a while because it's going to take everybody to be prepared for that, to change to happen. But what I will say is what I've heard from a number of Open Athens customers is what they do is they create more generic user accounts. They don't actually create an account in Open Athens for every specific walk-in user.
Exactly.
They might create 10 or 20 guest accounts and they share those with users who are just coming into the building to access resources. And so now you're only managing 10 or 20, and maybe you change the password once a week or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can do that in a bulk process, so it's very easy to manage that. You don't have to create an account for every single user in that model.
So would you just say, like, sign in as a guest? Like, let's say you're trying to buy something on the website, you didn't want to create a user account. So you do something like that.
Kind of. So you have to at least interface with somebody who has the ability to create that guest account. Not just anybody can create a guest account because there's that level of
access to the
control.
admin side.
Yeah. So you have to go and have a conversation with Michelle and say, hey, Michelle, can I please have a guest account? And you need to be able to at least prove that you're somehow a walk-in user or that you are a dual enroll person or you just signed up for this class and I need to get temporary access to that resource. But then what Open Athens can do is say, would you like to log in to the single sign-on system, or are you a walk-in user? And so through that selection, as long as you do have an authenticated or an authorized account from your friendly librarian, such as Michelle, then you can log into the system, and it will ask you how you want to log in. And so we also have examples where in a consortial arrangement where I have access to the resources at the library at the university down the street, but I'm not registered there, but we have a consortial agreement that I can access resources from that library, but log in with my university credentials. And so Open Athens can really help facilitate that. So it's great for consortia as well, as you can see with the Galileo group.
Absolutely.
It's been a big help.
And with Galileo, we're going to have unique accounts. So like, we're going to have our public library account that we can log in as the public library patron. We have our university account, and I think they're thinking in the future that we'll be able to toggle between which account type we would like to use. For example, certain resources are only available at certain levels. Yes. Uh-huh.
Elaborate just a little more on the time-intensive nature of advertising your links, how long, what was your time frame, how many people did you have working on it?
It was me. It was pretty much me. And so I had a lot of help from Galileo. So I had to download all of the links, figure out which ones needed to be changed. I probably finished it like in about a week after we went live. Thankfully, we were live during our semester break, right before Christmas. But it's not really a task that you can easily sit at the information desk and have like every person come up to you and be like, hey, I need this, or hey, I need that. You really have to focus on it. Yes.
There was a
Recently switched from using proxy to Open Athens to kind of going on that outsourcing. We have our members with ebooks that have been embedded in school leads, trying to figure out the best way to identify them, to contact customers, people who know that you are on the students. Is there any suggestions?
I know on our side, we just kind of, hey, here's what changed. If you have a link, please see us if you need to have it updated. I think that Galileo is actually trying to get a redirector developed just so that faculty can have access to it on their own versus, having to contact us every time they need to change a link. Also, we have Galileo embedded in our learning management system, Blackboard, and so they can build their curriculum easily that way. And so now that we're live almost a year, we're just saying, hey, go in, find your links, build it in your LMS like that.
One of the other tips that I give libraries too, and it requires a little bit more help from your IT department, but you probably have something like proxy.university.edu, which is what you've been using, and now that's changing to the OpenAthens Redirector. What you could do, if you ask your university IT department, maybe get them a beer or something, is you could have them set up the proxy URL that you have at your institution to redirect to the OpenAthens URL so that those old links still work. They just go through a couple of hops, but that also helps to address the problem of these old links that need to get updated. They could still potentially work. So you might want to go knock on the door of a friendly IT person at your institution, go get them a beer or some chocolate or something, and maybe they can help you with that problem. Beer usually helps. We're well over the session, but the good news is I just checked is there's nobody else in this room after the session, so we're happy to stick around and answer any other questions. So, but thank you if you have to run. I understand. We won't be upset.
Thank you.